Arrogance is repulsive. I mean, why do you have such a gut reaction when you meet or interact with someone who you believe is arrogant? It's interesting. At least from the perspective of being the receiver of someone who's arrogant, it means that basically the arrogant person is telling you in some way that they're above you, they're smarter than you, but yeah, they're better than you. It's debilitating to be the receiver of someone who's arrogant, and it makes you feel small. But wouldn't this reaction only occur if you yourself were insecure in your own position? So, I wanted to discuss arrogance. First, I want to discuss possible origins, solutions to if you're a receiver, and as well as solutions if you are the one who's arrogant. So, to begin, is arrogance cultural? Or is the repulsiveness of arrogance cultural? I would argue so. Probably most of it. I mean, I think that you are taught in general life to repulse arrogance. Maybe not repulse arrogance, but just being arrogant is not attractive in a way. And perhaps you learn this yourself, that you just don't feel good when you know someone arrogant. And I mean, at least for me, I was pretty arrogant in middle school, but I was given a heavy dose of confrontation of a sort to my arrogance, and that very quickly put me in my place. I think that because of this, a lot of people learn to not be arrogant. But perhaps on the other side, it also makes them more arrogant. It's a tough sled. But from this example, I just wanted to say basically people will respond very badly to arrogance, especially in the younger years of your life. I would consider myself lucky to have gotten that response when I was younger, because as people tend to age, I find that people become more mellow. People will tend to ignore the arrogant person rather than confront it because of possible pain that comes with it. So you're taught by life, right? I'd also say it's a little bit it's taught by media, such as when you watch movies or TV. Usually the antagonist or bad guy is arrogant, or usually the arrogant guy is the bad guy or antagonist. It's not the antagonist doesn't necessarily need to be arrogant, but usually those who are arrogant end up losing, and that tells us that arrogance is something to be avoided, because unless you want to be a loser, of course. So in this respect, we were taught that possibly, that arrogance was the main factor that blinded them to their own weaknesses, and thus they lost. But you also have to keep in mind that there's also other factors that may play a part. So past the cultural, is it genetic? I guess you can argue there is some genetics in it, if you were to look at it evolutionary speaking. So if you think about evolutionary, those who are arrogant typically did not stay in a group And so back like a couple thousand of years ago, blah 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 blah, you needed to be in a group if you wanted to survive long term. And so if you weren't in that group, you wouldn't survive. And you could say there's a resurgence in arrogance because there's no like existential threat every single day. There's like no threat of not finding enough food today, not surviving the winter. Everything is, living conditions, at least in first world countries, are way above the standards of our like past generations. That okay, no, it's not past. It's like thousands of years ago. But anyway, I feel like from this, there's a reason why most arrogant people are like depicted as those who are rich. You know, in movies, it's like it's usually those who are nobility or those who have a lot of wealth and power who are the most arrogant. Just a thought. So I mean, why is this? I mean, you could say because we're no longer fighting day by day for like food, shelter, water, we spend more time thinking about like the social hierarchy and where we belong and such. Lost me. Anyway. I guess another reason is when you're wealthy, I guess you might want to be more special. I guess no, actually scratch that. I guess another reason why there's a resurgence in us being more arrogant is because so many of us in first world countries are so well off. We tend to want to like be unique and special in some way. Because back then, at least in hunter-gatherer tribes, we had certain roles, you know? You had like the people who went berry picking, you know, you had the people who went hunting. You know, there's these tight niches because the group was so small. But now you can like connect with virtually every single person in the world, in the world through the internet. So, in a sense, you want to feel special. Of course, this is assuming that you have that need and desire to be special, and that's another entire thing. So, what does arrogance really mean? Well, it means that, so if I was arrogant, it means that I'm insecure about myself. So I need to elevate myself to make myself feel better. That's really what it is. I want to stand out. I want to feel special. And this is due to past traumas, perhaps. Not getting enough love and attention, being rejected, so and so. I mean, from the Freud perspective, from the Freudian perspective, it's basically just past traumas. And I feel like that makes up probably the majority. And I guess the thing is, wanting to feel special, I think that's normal. I guess in a way. I guess you want to be unique. You want to be a person of sort. I feel like wanting to be a person is normal for anyone with an ego. Being special is perhaps more so of being insecure. So. Moving on. So a lot of the times when you're arrogant, or so going back to the example, so if I'm arrogant, I will talk up my achievements, and sometimes, and probably a lot of the times, I will lie and play, like, make up stories and play myself up. And this just means that I'm so desperately wanting to be better than who I am currently. But this also begs the question, why doesn't an arrogant person work towards their goal to improve themselves? Well, because it's contradictory. Because working towards their goal would mean that they aren't there yet. It would mean that they aren't at the level that they want themselves to be at. And since they want to be congruent with themselves in the outside world, they cannot let that happen. So they will keep themselves down while trying to make themselves appear higher. And perhaps this is because they start believing the stories that they tell themselves and others. But I'd rather say it's the former. So, if you are arrogant, how do you solve this? Or help yourself in being less arrogant? Be grateful. Be grateful for what you have. Be grateful for the privileges that you have, whatever they are. Be mindful. Really, really think every day. Challenge your mind. From this, be open-minded to the idea that everyone knows something more than you. Every single person does. Because I know that because you are not the holder of all knowledge. You do not know everything. So, from this, talk to lots of new people. Learn from new perspectives. Learn from them. Gain a better worldview. Gain perspective. Learn how small you truly are. Actively improve yourself. And if you're arrogant, it will take humility to actually get yourself to improve, because you so desperately want what you're saying in the outside world, what you're saying to the outside world and yourself to be true. But you need some humility. You need to admit that you aren't that. You aren't what you're saying. You are a fraud, essentially. Admit it. Have humility. So that you can improve. So that you can actually build yourself up and actually get to where you want to go. So how do you improve yourself? I mean, if you're in self-development, you pretty much already know, like, the basics. So meditate, gain knowledge, or like read books, go to the gym, create something. I mean, creating something is most of challenging your mind. First three are plenty enough already, but if you want the extra challenge, create something. Damn. So, if you're on the receiving end, what should you do? Well, the first thing is to remember that you would act the exact same way if you were that person, if you had their memories, if you lived like them. You would do the exact same thing. Because you think the exact same things. You would be just like them. So have some humility yourself. Remember that they're like this because they're insecure. This means that you want to ignore their attempts at putting you down, but you also want to be compassionate with them So being compassionate, it doesn't mean that you're going to like give in to them and shower them with praise, because that won't help. That will only light up their fire of arrogance even more. What you want to do is create boundaries. And you know, a lot of people in general aren't even taught how to create boundaries. But I think I've learned recently, and so I'm not good at it, but yeah. But what you want to do is basically you want to first formulate a boundary in your head, so you have an idea of what the boundary is going to look like. You want it to be manageable. You want it to be like as simple as possible. You don't want it to complicate it. You want it as simple as possible. So once you have that boundary created in your head, you want to confront the person. You want to talk to them. You want to say that what they're doing is making you feel some way, so making you feel bad, whatever. You want to give them a warning before you enforce the boundary, and if they break that warning, or if they do it again, enforce the boundary. And the most challenging part is enforcing the boundary. I find that is the most challenging part. And from this, you want to confront them very early on, as early as possible, because you can like tie arrogant people with bullies. The earlier you confront them, the earlier they will stop, because they will learn that you are someone who stands up to for themselves, and thus they'll usually find it annoying, so they'll just find someone else weaker who doesn't stand up to them and go to them and bully them instead. So confront them first, at the first instance of insults. Otherwise, they won't really leave you. And when you confront them, you don't want to point out their arrogance per se, because they will get extremely defensive about it. And well, when someone gets defensive, they'll use any sort of emotional reason to defend themselves. They will appear illogical. So don't do that. Instead, point out their actions and how they made you feel. So you can say, I was hurt by what you said. I didn't like how you said that, like the phrase blah 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 blah, like on Friday. Could you, I don't know, could you not say that to me again? Or say similar things to me again? And if they reject your ideas, then, well, at least you tried. You know, at least you know in your heart that you tried. But once you tried, that means you know that things would most likely not change. And so then from then on, your best course of action is to basically leave them. Just get away from them. And if you can't do that, then try your best to limit how much time you interact with them as much as possible, because arrogant people, at least from my perspective, they drain me. It takes me a lot of mental power to like be with them. At least that's in my experience. So hope that this video helped, and I wish you the best.